John Maxwell once said, "Leadership is taking responsibility while others are making excuses." Leadership is important because it inspires, motivates, and sets an example for others to accomplish positive changes in the world. Every summer, my family picks out a bunch of books to read. Usually, these books provide some inspiration for our next season of speech and debate. As I was building my summer stack, I noticed that my dad had a book on his shelf about Navy SEALs called Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. It's about how Navy SEALs lead and win, which sounded pretty interesting to me. Now, this book contained a tremendous amount of information on leadership, and I've learned many concepts related to how successful leaders make a huge difference in the world. The foremost concept was that responsibility is the most basic and important trait that leaders must possess, and I believe that everyone should value responsibility as the critical skill necessary to achieve success personally or in a team. Now, each person here in this room is a leader in some capacity. Whether you are a parent, a coach, manager, brother, sister, or friend, you are a leader. Anyone who can make a difference and impact someone else's life is a leader. Now, in order to fully understand the importance of responsibility, we first have to look at what responsibility means. Then we'll begin to unpack the aspects that make it so important. Oxford Dictionary defines responsibility as a duty to deal with or take care of somebody or something so that you may be blamed if something goes wrong. Now, there are two key components to understanding responsibility. The first aspect is having a duty to deal with or take care of somebody or something, and the second is responsibility over failures. We need to look at these two aspects separately in order to fully understand the importance of responsibility in leadership. Now, leadership and being responsible means assuming ownership over people or a team. In my family, we started out learning about having responsibility by having to do our chores and maintain our rooms. We clean our rooms, make our beds, and put our stuff away. As we grow up, we get larger responsibilities, like doing the dishes, doing our homework, and not waiting till the last minute to write and memorize our speeches, which has never happened. As leaders, we succeed by taking care of areas of ownership or teams. We have to take care of the things that we're put in charge of. In the book Extreme Ownership, Willink and Babin tell of a battlefield example that perfectly illustrates the high stakes of assuming responsibilities for failures. Now, there are many things that can happen in a battle, but when a blue-on-blue incident happens, it's disastrous. Now, in this story, Boat Crew 2 dominated these races, and Boat Crew 6 placed last nearly every time. When the SEAL instructors asked Boat 6 what was happening, their leader complained and said that his team was bad, that it was their fault. When the SEAL instructors asked Boat 6 what was happening, their leader complained and said that the team was bad and that was their fault. So the instructors decided to test a theory and teach the team something. They made the boat leaders swap. In the Navy, they like to say there are no bad crews, only bad leaders. This was a chance to test that theory. Now, while the original leader of Boat Crew 2 wasn't exactly happy to be going to a losing boat, the leader of Boat Crew 6 was ecstatic. He thought that no amount of effort on his part would make Boat Crew 6 perform any better. After the race started, the instructors sped to the finish line to watch what was happening. As the boats neared the end, two were clearly out in front, boats 2 and 6. Amazingly, Boat Crew 6 crossed the finish line first. The perennial last place crew won the race because of a change in leadership, while good habits that developed among Boat Crew 2 were almost enough to put them in front again. The difference was the leadership of the boat crews. The original leader of Boat Crew 2 was a responsible leader. If something went wrong, he would say, "My bad, I could have been better," or "No worries, let's change this." He tried to win without blaming and yelling at his teammates. There are two key lessons that can be learned from this story. First, don't have a poor me attitude and blame the circumstances. Focus on learning how to do something better. And second, a good leader can lead anybody. When we take responsibility for the teams that we lead, we significantly impact them, and they will learn good habits and retain those habits when we are no longer their leader. The second part about responsibility, as we learned from the definition, is where the rubber meets the road. As the definition stated, so that you can be blamed. This is the hard part. Accepting responsibility for failures means that somebody can be blamed if things don't go well. In my family, we have a regular visitor, and quite frankly, he's not very welcome. His name is Mr. Nobody. When Mr. Nobody shows up, he leaves trash on the floor, he doesn't put his dishes in the sink, and leaves the bathroom a mess. Has anybody else ever encountered this guy? The weird thing is that no one in my home has ever met Mr. Nobody, but my parents are constantly complaining about how often he shows up. All I can say about Mr. Nobody is that he is not a responsible person. Now, Mr. Nobody happens when something has gone wrong, and there's no one to assume responsibility for that failure. Now, in the book Extreme Ownership, Link and Babin tell of a battlefield example that perfectly illustrates the high stakes of assuming responsibility for failures. Now, there are many things that can happen in a battle, but when a blue-on-blue incident happens, it's disastrous. Blue-on-blue fire is also called friendly fire. That's when the good guys fire upon their own troops. In this example, Navy SEALs unknowingly shot their Iraqi counterparts. So an investigation was launched, and Willink had to prepare a brief detailing what had transpired. Serious mistakes were made both on the planning side and on the battlefield during the execution of the plan. Multiple things contributed to critical failures, too many to count. As Willink assembled a list that detailed everything that went wrong, he knew once the blame was determined that there was a high probability that the military would dismiss the person at fault. As the commander, he knew he had to take complete ownership because he oversaw the mission. In the story, he didn't allow the rest of the team to assume responsibility for what was ultimately his fault. This is what a leader does, even if it means getting fired. Responsibility is assuming ownership over every little thing that affects your mission, even when the outcome is bad. Responsibility is not having a poor me attitude. Now, the poor me phenomenon is where one labels others as well as life and the world at large as harsh, cruel, unfair, or bad for treating them unjustly. But people who blame others or circumstances for negative things that happen will ultimately fail. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you will never fail if you take responsibility. We are all by no means infallible leaders, and no one is, no matter how experienced. We don't have all the answers, and no leader does. We're going to make mistakes. Often, our mistakes provide the greatest lessons, humble us, and enable us to grow and become better. For leaders, the humility to admit and own mistakes is the aspect of responsibility that is essential for success. Be the person taking responsibility, not the one making excuses. Good leaders are not driven by ego or personal agenda. They're simply focused on the mission and how best to accomplish it. You should integrate responsibility into your life because it significantly impacts the teams we lead and leads us to success. You are a leader. So why not try to be the best leader that you can be? Now, an easy way to start taking responsibility is by taking blame. Do what a leader should and find out where you failed and admit that failure. Don't place blame on others. Instead, say, here's what I did wrong, and here's how I can fix it. In any situation where you fail, you can always find somewhere for improvement. But you have to make that change. I can give you the speech. And I can tell you the best and most important things that you need to do to succeed, but the choice is ultimately up to you. I encourage that you not only find what you could have done better, but take responsibility and make that change. As leaders, if we want to succeed, we have to take responsibility and make that change. As John Maxwell said, leadership is taking responsibility while others are making excuses. Leadership is important. And the foremost trait all leaders must possess is responsibility, whether we're cleaning our rooms, writing speeches, or making sure Mr. Nobody doesn't come to visit. All of us can begin to take responsibility in our lives. We start by taking extreme ownership over our contribution, not placing blame on others, but instead taking blame wherever we can make improvements. Leadership in this manner will significantly impact the teams that we lead and be the beginning of leadership by example, which is something that we all should want to manifest. Thank you.